Hey, happy Friday. This week it looks like Snapdragon PCs are not selling well, potentially putting all of Windows ARM in danger. Intel announced their turnaround plans, and it looks like the TikTok ban might actually be happening. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video is sponsored by Ground News. Okay, for my first story of the week, it looks like the Snapdragon laptops are not selling well, and that might actually pull the plans of other chip makers like MediaTek with them as well. Reports from Digitimes talk about disappointing reviews and market feedback, and how those have caused a decline in both shipments and momentum. A decline in momentum is a pretty scary thing for a product that has just launched after years of hype. Apparently laptop sales are slow now in general, but it also seems like the new chips just didn't create the big splash that Qualcomm was hoping for out of the gate. I find that a little bit surprising because I really quite like my Snapdragon-powered laptop and I've mostly heard positive reviews, but oh well. Anyway, the report says that Qualcomm's early missteps may also impact MediaTek's market entry plans, as that company was also tipped to launch an ARM chip for Windows soon, along with the likes of Nvidia, Samsung, and AMD. Intel is specifically positioning Lunar Lake to be undercutting ARM with efficiency before a large enough group of people actually make the switch, and reviews for that should be coming out pretty soon, so we'll know whether Intel was correct or whether they were basically making things up again. All the laptop makers are saying that they're hoping that the end of support for Windows 10, combined with new AI hardware, is going to create a new upgrade cycle. A lot of people buying new machines, but honestly, I'm a little bit skeptical about both of those. Anyway, my second story of the week is that Intel has finally announced big plans to try to save its business, which has been in a really tough spot lately. First, Intel announced that they have a big new partnership with AWS from Amazon, where they will produce custom AI fabric chips on Intel 18A and custom Xeon 6 chips on Intel 3 for AWS, primarily in Ohio. If that works out, it could be a major customer win for Intel, who really needs major customer wins. Second, they were also awarded up to $3 billion in direct funding by the US government's Secure Enclave program. This program tries to ensure US manufacturing for key semiconductors. Meanwhile, third, Intel has announced that it has paused its European expansion to Poland and Germany for at least 2 years. This includes the huge fab that they planned in Magdeburg in Germany. That is obviously a huge blow to chip independence in the EU, plus of course there's no guarantee that they'll actually restart everything after 2 years. Intel has specifically not stopped its US manufacturing investments, which together with their new money from the US government is a pretty clear sign that they simply decided to focus on their home market at the expense of Europe. Overall, these are some really big changes for Intel again, and I'll actually be making a full video on my TechAltar channel about how Intel is trying to get back on track again, so stay tuned for that. Okay, and for my third story of the week, it looks like TikTok might actually be getting banned after a lot of back and forth. So you might have heard that TikTok is trying to prevent the US government from either removing it from app stores in the US or from forcing it to split off from China as a separate company. They're fighting this in court basically as we speak, and things have taken a turn for the worse for their company. Bloomberg Intelligence has cut the company's chances of beating the proposed ban to 30% from 70% after a hearing that they called rough. One analyst said that, quote, "This is not a drill. The only way for TikTok to stop the ban, other than the sale that looks like a non-starter, is to win in court." They only have until the 19th of January to do that in court, which now seems more and more unlikely. As Bloomberg put it, the TikTok ban moves closer to reality, while apps users ignore the obvious. Which is true. I think many people have kind of just gotten bored with the story and moved on, when in reality the ban might actually be coming pretty soon. Okay, moving on, we start our release monitor with the new 5th generation spectacles from Snapchat. These are still only aimed at developers, but they now have a fairly impressive sounding waveguide display with a 46-degree field of view and a pretty high resolution 37 pixels per degree, plus a faster processor, slightly less terrible battery life at 45 minutes of continuous use, etc. Snapchat says that their glasses will become consumer grade potentially by the end of the decade, which is still pretty far off. And the more concrete but perhaps less impressive product in this category is HTC's new Vive Focus Vision. The headset has eye tracking, but somehow still only Fresnel lenses and LCD screens at $999, and I honestly don't know what HTC is even thinking here. Meta Connect is about a week from now. This is where Zuck will show their company's new VR and AR headsets, and I really hope that they'll actually have something more interesting than this to show. Moving on, the first Thunderbolt 5 dock has also just launched as the elegantly named SD500T5 EQ, which will support up to 3 4K monitors and also up to 120 gigabits per second for $400. All hail the new Thunderbolt. Meanwhile, DJI has announced a new action camera called the Osmo Action 5 Pro. It has the usual specs like a 1/1.3-inch sensor plus an OLED screen, but it also only costs $350, which is pretty competitive. Huawei also announced the new Watch GT 5 and 5 Pro, but perhaps more interestingly, also the Watch G2, which claims to be the first watch on the market to enable 24-hour blood pressure management integrated into the wristband for €399. I don't know what you'd need continuous blood pressure monitoring for, maybe you can tell me, but it sure sounds pretty impressive. And to wrap up the release monitor, we also have the $179 Quiet Comfort earbuds from Bose, which are supposed to compete with the newer AirPod 4s, and Xiaomi also teased that the Xiaomi Mix Flip would come to markets outside of China very soon too. Alright, moving on to the brief, we got a new report saying that Apple's long-awaited self-developed Wi-Fi chip will finally launch in 2025, probably in an iPad, while their first 5G modem should launch in the 2024 iPhone SE 4. Both a random iPad and the iPhone SE sound like pretty low priority models, maybe not huge volumes either, which makes sense for a company just starting to build their own wireless chips. And staying with Apple, the company has also released new versions of all of its operating systems. There are tons of new things like a new password app or iMessage, which now finally supports RCS, etc., but still missing are most of the Apple Intelligence features, and the company also had to pull its iPadOS 18 update from M4 iPad Pro models after some users reported that their devices were getting bricked. Oops. Next, MediaTek's big upcoming chip, the Dimensity 9400, was tipped by a leaker called Digital Chat Station to be launching on the 9th of October, with phones carrying the chip launching within a week. So it looks like both MediaTek and Qualcomm will have their flagship chips coming out in the fall, and we can actually expect the first flagship Android phones with these chips by the holidays, which would be really early. And then in unusual news, Google actually won something in the EU for once, with a court saying that it doesn't actually have to pay a €1.5 billion fine. This could still be appealed, but I bet they're pretty happy. And meanwhile, Google's autonomous driving company Waymo announced that it will expand to Austin and Atlanta in 2025, but also that it will do so in collaboration with Uber, so you can actually book the rides via Uber's app. Uber drivers are obviously not enthusiastic about this, especially because the companies are positioning the Waymo cars as the premium options that consumers should pay more for. So they're saying that the robots are better than the humans. And talking of robots, Amazon called its workers back into the office 5 days a week in a fairly spicy public letter to employees, joining the many other companies who are starting to turn away from working from home. Oh man, that really just sucks. I thought we got at least something out of the pandemic, but alas. And in dodgy gaming news, first Nintendo and Pokemon decided to sue Palworld, the company that made a very obvious Pokemon-inspired game without a license, of course, while second, Flappy Bird's creator wants you to know that he's got nothing to do with the new version of the game that we talked about last week. He says he did not sell anything, and instead his trademarks were simply considered abandoned, so some company called Game Tech Holdings LLC picked it up for free, and what else? Decided to jam it full of crypto nonsense. And yeah, checks out, it's always the goddamn crypto weirdos. And you've probably already heard the wildest news of the week, which is that first so-called pagers and then walkie-talkies were made to explode remotely in Lebanon, presumably by Israel's secret service. Just absolutely mind-blowing. Details about the attack are emerging little by little. The Japanese company called ICOM, for example, that made the walkie-talkies, is saying that they discontinued the production a decade ago and is now investigating what might have happened. With sensitive stories like these, it is particularly important to get reliable context, and that's why I recommend Ground News. Ground News is a website and an app that gives you this kind of context, and for example, for this walkie-talkie story in particular, they offered dozens of different sources that I could go through to quickly pick one of them that was from the center, had high factuality, and was also from Japan for bonus points. There we go, that's Japan Times. One can easily filter to only see stories from the left, center, or the right, covering each story. You're shown a political bias distribution to see which side covers any given story more. We can see the factuality ratings for the various news outlets, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. There's a view showing ownership types and even a map in case a certain country's perspective is particularly interesting to you. And this even works for individual news sources, so I can see that TASS here, for example, is owned by the Russian government right away, and I might or might not want to hear what they have to say about a story. Ground News even has a dedicated blind spot section that shows you news stories that were mostly covered by only one side of the political spectrum. So to get smart about the news, go to ground.news/Friday checkout, or click on the link in the description, and don't forget to try a premium subscription for a full picture. You can get 40% off of that with my link, so be sure to use that, and I'll see you next Friday.